On the Late Debate, how safe is London? As the number of violent deaths falls, why are young black men still more likely to be victims of murder? Also tonight, more 20-mile-per-hour zones for London, but should there be a limit to the rollout?
3 in the morning, why am I driving 20 miles an hour? Everybody who's vulnerable would not be on the street 3 in the morning.
And will new revelations about security stop China getting its mega London embassy? Hello and welcome to the Late Debate. Violent deaths in London have fallen. Proof, says the Mayor, that the capital is safer than critics claim. There were 97 violent deaths in London in 2025, the lowest level in more than a decade. But can it continue? And why is London still a city where young black men are more likely to be victims of murder?
The most startling statistic from the stuff we published this week wasn't the fact we've got the lowest homicide rate since records began in London on a per capita basis, but there are 44% fewer young people going to A&Es with a knife injury. There are 13,900 fewer violent people injured per year as a direct consequence of our policies. So we're going to build on that.
Joining me now to discuss that are my guests this week. From Labour, the MP for Hendon, David Pinto-Dushinsky. For the Conservatives, the Shadow Home Secretary and MP for Croydon South, Chris Philp. And from the Liberal Democrats, the MP for Twickenham, Munira Wilson. Welcome, all of you. David, we shouldn't be celebrating 2 deaths a week in London, should we?
Look, of course, any death is a tragedy, but I think it's really important that we also talk about the huge progress that has been made. As Sadiq Khan just pointed out, murders aren't just down, they are the lowest since record began, potentially the lowest ever. And what's more, it's not just murder. We've seen crimes of violence causing injury down 14%. We've seen street robbery down 15%. We've seen thefts from the person down 11%. And London is now safer, not just in terms of homicide, than any US state, but than any major capital or any major city in Europe. And whether it's violence against women, whether it's violence leading to injury, it's safer than other parts of Britain too. And this hasn't happened by accident. It's happened because of the relentless crackdown that the Met's had on crime, but also because of the action we've taken to focus on prevention and on early intervention, delivering over 500,000 early interventions to help stop crime before it starts.
Chris, you're a Shadow Home Secretary as well as the London MP. Even critics of Sadiq Khan must be pleased at these latest figures.
Well, of course, the homicide rate has actually fallen across the entire country. It's not just in London. I'm pleased that London, like the rest of the country, has gone down. Knife injuries in London and the rest of the country are down thanks to many of the initiatives the last government put in place. It's not a London phenomena. It is a UK or England and Wales wide phenomena. Now, there are, I'm afraid, some crimes that are not going down. Shoplifting has surged under Sadiq Khan. Mobile phone theft up by 50%. Robberies have increased. There are far more robberies, far more shoplifting, far more mobile phone thefts in London per capita than anywhere else in the country. And the Met Police, unfortunately, are solving a tiny, tiny fraction of those. They're solving barely 5%, meaning 95% of crime in Sadiq Khan's London goes unsolved. And what's happening to police numbers across the rest of the UK? Police numbers are going up, thanks to the last Conservative government. But in London, under a Labour mayor, police numbers have fallen by 1,700 since the general election. And Mark Rowley has warned this year they're going to fall by another 1,500. That means only one thing: fewer police on the streets, Londoners being less safe. So yes, great, London has followed the rest of the country on homicide, but mobile phone theft, shoplifting, knife crime, all going up under Sadiq Khan.
Munira, Sadiq Khan has accused right-wing commentators, including Donald Trump, of talking down London. Does he have a point?
He does, actually. And, I'm a born and bred London girl. I don't recognise some of the things that Trump, Farage and friends like Elon Musk come out with about London. I think some of it is quite racist, what they say about the fact that London's being taken over by foreigners and there are no-go areas. So obviously I welcome the fact that we've seen a reduction in murders. That's got to be a good thing, and in violent crime. It's unusual for me to ever agree with Chris, but I agree with him on the point that we've seen shoplifting rates rise, going through the roof. I think it was something like £50 million worth of mobile phone theft in 2024 alone. And the problem we've got is when you speak to Mark Rowley and he talks about his Tough Choices programme, he's having to make cuts to many of our specialist police. We've seen our parks police lost, our specialist police in schools. And in areas like my own, in Twickenham, we're seeing our police front counter shut soon. And that is only going to reduce trust in the police, I think, because if you don't have that visible community presence at the police station, which is really accessible, where people are concerned about crime, that there's going to be a real problem. And let's not forget, when it comes to violence against women and girls, a lot of that crime goes unreported.
Well, and look, I did want to come back on this because I think Chris is slightly struggling with his memory, so let me help him out. You're right about shoplifting, but that is because the last government changed the law to essentially decriminalise shoplifting.
That isn't true. Well, because under Section 1 of the Theft Act 1968, shoplifting remains illegal. So I'm afraid you're wrong, David. Completely wrong as a question of law.
You deprioritised it. You told the police not to act on it.
No, we didn't.
We have changed that. And by the way, lots of police officers thank us for doing that. Problem one. Problem two, you starved the Met of money. In real terms, it saw a £1.2 billion cut across the last decade. What we're doing in answer to that is putting in lots more money. Sadiq Khan's put in over £1 billion. Over £1 billion. Sorry, let me finish. Over £1 billion, more than double the levels it was under Boris Johnson. We've also seen more money from the government. And it's because of that we're beginning to clean up the mess that you left. And
the last government increased the Met's funding every single year. The Metropolitan Police, David, is the highest funded police force in the country on a per capita basis by some margin. And Sadiq Khan is the Police and Crime Commissioner. He sets the London budget, and he could quite easily have increased the funding even further if he wanted to.
On Chris's point about the Met being the best funded police force, it does have some massive national responsibilities, being our capital city
Even taking
here.
those out, it's still the highest funded.
And we did see under the last government the capital city grant for London reduce drastically in real terms. And given the number of protests and events and things that happen in London, which the Met Police has to police, that needed to be addressed. Now, I do welcome that the Labour government has increased that grant to some extent, but clearly the increase in funding has been nowhere near enough, because the Met Commissioner is saying plainly to London MPs, I'm going to have to make cuts because I don't have enough money. And if you don't have enough visibility of police officers on our streets, you're going to struggle to cut those crime rates, whether it's burglary, whether it's bike theft, whether it's mobile phone theft.
Can I just bring you around to that other important point? Chris, you're a Croydon MP where there's been quite a lot of knife crime. Why is it that young black men are more disproportionately likely to be victims?
Well, that is a huge question. I mean, more likely to be victims, actually more likely to be perpetrators, I'm sorry to say, as well. One of the problems is that Sadiq Khan massively scaled back stop and search since he became mayor. And as a result of that, knife crime in London, since Sadiq Khan became mayor, is up by over 60%. So I would like to see stop and search used more, respectfully and lawfully, of course, because it does take knives off the street. And I've met families in Croydon whose son, and actually in some cases daughter, has been the victim of knife crime. And they will say, look, I wish my son's killer had been stopped and searched before he used that knife to kill my son.
Very briefly, David, how much is this London is a safer city pitch rolling ahead of the May elections?
Not at all. These are the basic facts. And I think it's really sad that we have a London MP in Chris peddling this, frankly, misinformation to try to scare people and stir up fear. It's frankly irresponsible.
Shoplifting is up. Mobile phone thefts are up.
Let me finish. Of course there are challenges. I don't deny that phone snatching's up, right? But that's why, for instance, we've had a major operation to target the people. But look, we need to have a proper balanced conversation, not this scaremongering, because it's doing down London. And frankly, it's feeding into a narrative which has nothing to do with police, which is about people who are just attacking London because they hate the success of this city.
Let's just pause on crime for a minute, because we need to move on, because love them or hate them, London is getting more 20-mile-an-hour zones. To the mayor, lowering the speed limit is an important way to cut road deaths, but critics see them as anti-motorists, and the number of people being fined is going up.
3 in the morning, why am I driving 20 miles an hour? everybody who's vulnerable would not be on the street 3 in the morning. My theory is this: if you're going to have 20 miles an hour, have them at peak times in the areas of schools.
Last year, 110 people were killed on London's roads. Over 3,500 people were injured. Many of those are on main roads, so TfL has introduced the safer speed limits on many of its roads. And where that has happened, we've seen a 25% fall in the number of collisions, saving lives across the capital.
Munira, how big a fan are you of 20 mile an hour zones?
Look, my view is it should be down to local authorities consulting with their communities, and if the community wants it, then there should be 20 mile per hour zones implemented. In the London Borough of Richmond, which is where my constituency is, the Lib Dem Council introduced one. It was part of their manifesto when they took control back in 2018, and it's actually proved to be a great success. And we've seen accidents, particularly involving pedestrians, reduce, and we haven't actually seen a material difference in the slowing down of traffic. And actually the London-wide data shows it hasn't put up congestion, and actually children, the rates of children being hurt or seriously injured has massively gone down. So I think in general they're a good thing, but it should be up to local communities to decide if they want them.
David, you've got the Finchley Road in your constituency.
Yeah.
It's a dual carriageway. It used to be 40 miles an hour, now 20 miles an hour. That's crackers, isn't it?
So look, obviously, we've got to look at this in the round. But the broad thing is, from my point of view, I want to go where the evidence takes us. What we know about 20 miles an hour is that dropping that speed limit has saved huge numbers of lives. For instance, since that's been brought in, we've seen 34% less deaths and serious injuries on our roads. Now, it's clearly about striking a balance, protecting motorists while simultaneously protecting those who use the road. And that's also why the government's introduced a broader road strategy, road safety strategy, to cut deaths by 65% by 2035.
You are an Outer London MP, Chris. There is a difference, isn't there? There appears to be Outer London councils less inclined to go for 20 mile an hour.
Yeah, that's right, because people in Outer London tend to be a little bit more dependent on their cars to get around. The roads are less congested in Outer London. So in Inner London, it makes less of a difference because the average traffic speed is often naturally below 20 miles an hour anyway. Look, my view on 20 mile an hour limits, there may be a case for them in some locations, for example, near schools, or if there are particular roads that have a high accident rate. But I think in general, 20 miles an hour is pretty low. And I certainly don't support blanket 20 mile an hour limits. They should be used in a very limited, very selective way. And sometimes some councils who are essentially anti-car use 20 mile an hour limits as a way of getting at motorists, and I think that makes me pretty concerned.
Is your council anti-car?
No, they're wanting to protect children and other vulnerable people and pedestrians as well as cyclists on our roads. And actually, in response to the consultation when the 20 mile per hour zone went in across the borough, in response to feedback, there were some main roads that were kept at 30 miles per hour rather than 20 miles per hour. And actually some of those, on sort of further consultation after studies were done after the first 4 years, there were actually residents campaigning to see some of those main roads then reduced from 30 to 20. That's what I mean about listening to communities and what they want to see in their local area to keep themselves, their children, their vulnerable adults safe.
You have an education brief. Is one of the answers to road safety educating young people?
Well, clearly we have to teach young people to cross the road safely, and when they're learning to cycle, to cycle safely. I mean, the other thing that we've done quite a lot in my borough is school streets around schools where you minimise the amount of traffic around schools only for local residents in those areas. That's again helping to keep our children safe when they're going to and from school.
David, is blanket 20 mile an hour speed limits a blunt instrument?
Well, look, and I'm like Munira from a borough that hasn't introduced them across the board. And you mentioned a road in my seat that's 20 miles an hour. I also have huge roads that go much faster. So of course it's a case of horses for courses. But I think we do need to get the balance right. And in many cases, it will be right to lower that limit to increase safety.
We've talked about the May elections. Is the 20 mile, 30 mile an hour battle likely to be one that's going to figure in the elections?
Well, I think Conservative councils generally are a little bit more respectful towards motorists than Labour or even Lib Dem ones. And Conservative councils are, I think, very unlikely to ever impose a blanket 20 mile an hour limit. They should be used selectively, carefully, and only where completely necessary. I think blanket limits really are are a sort of fixation of the anti-car left, and you won't see Conservative councils doing that.
Munira, I see some distinct eye rolling there.
The fact that Chris characterises 20 miles per hour as anti-car.
Blanket.
It's about protecting people. I think there are actually examples, I don't have them to hand, Chris, but I know there are examples across the country of Conservative-run councils that have introduced 20 miles per hour. And you've got to look at the evidence and you've got to listen to local people.
Smart motorways have variable speed limits. Could that be an answer?
Quite complicated on local roads, and those smart motorways, I've got to say, have quite a checkered and questionable safety record. And certainly if you're looking at roads in an urban area, I think variable speed limits would be quite difficult practically to implement. So I'd be a little bit careful about that.
OK, well, time's running out for the Prime Minister to make a decision about whether China should get a new embassy in London. Whatever Keir Starmer decides, he's guaranteed to upset someone. Some of his own MPs are worried about security after new concerns were raised this week. But getting approval has been an important priority for China.
I'm standing directly over the cabling that connects the City of London to Canary Wharf, that critical financial infrastructure which is positioned less than a metre from the perimeter of what will become the new Chinese mega embassy and accessible underground to the Chinese if they are allowed to go ahead and develop this into an embassy site.
Do you all have concerns, or are you all relaxed about the new embassy?
Well, I'm not relaxed. I think it's a
concerned.
terrible idea.
Yeah,
Go first.
absolutely. No, very concerned, and I think Keir Starmer should put a stop to it. I mean, it would be a source of great shame, I think, if we get this Chinese super embassy. It's a betrayal of the thousands of Hong Kongers who've come to this country, many of whom have made their homes in this city, fleeing repression from the Chinese regime. And then we're inviting this mega embassy here, right here on our doorstep. I think that the government should absolutely put a stop to it.
China's got to have an embassy.
Well, they've gone already, haven't they?
Exactly.
And I totally agree with Munira. This is a terrible idea. The Americans have told us, and many others, that this will be a centre for espionage, not just in the UK, but across Europe. When I was technology minister in the last government, I can't go into details too much, but I can tell you China are engaging in systemic theft of IP, particularly relating to sensitive technologies. Giving them this massive base in the heart of London is a terrible idea. Right next to cabling, carrying sensitive data is deeply, deeply concerning as well. We know why they're doing it. Keir Starmer wants to kowtow to President Xi and the Chinese because he wants better economic links to bail him out of the terrible economic mess that he and Rachel Reeves have created. He is sacrificing our national security for the sake of bailing out his catastrophic economic management. It's bad for our security. It's bad for our country. China, as Munira said, have been running secret police stations here. They've been targeting Hong Kong and other dissidents. They've been stealing our intellectual property. They've been targeting our state institutions. They've even tried to infiltrate. Exactly, Munira. They've infiltrated Parliament. That a Labour MP taking money from a declared Chinese agent, Christine Lee. This whole thing is a terrible idea. And if Keir Starmer had the slightest regard for our national interest and our national security, he would decline this application. But I fear
Chris, your charge sheet's getting very long there. Guilty or not guilty?
So look, I'd take what Chris was saying a tiny bit more seriously if it wasn't the government he was part of that didn't just approve the sale of the Royal Mint to the Chinese, but actually approved its use as a diplomatic compound. And they didn't just approve it, they enthused about it. We've actually now since seen a letter from Boris Johnson to the Chinese foreign minister saying that he is looking forward to it being developed as a new embassy.
We never gave the consent.
We also have in Kemi Badenoch a Tory leader who said China's not the enemy, who refused to update the security.
So do you think China is the enemy?
Legislation.
Yeah, what do you think about this?
And who failed to act where Labour did act in running an audit. Now, obviously, this is something in front. This is something in front of planning ministers, so it would not be appropriate for me to comment. What I can say is we will always stand up for the national interest. Sorry. I am very clear that there's not a binary here. That we must, that China is the second largest economy in the world, so we must engage with them, but we must also challenge them and stand up for our values. We can do both, and so I don't think it's about that kind of binary. But what is clear is we will always stand up for this country's interests, and we will be robust in protecting our values.
But David, were you not concerned about those leaked plans, the plans for, these many underground rooms with all sorts of ventilation plans which suggest that they're going to have all sorts of data servers and things in there? One of your own MPs stood up the other day in Parliament and said he was worried that with one of his constituents, a Hong Konger who's got a bounty on her head, she could be at any point kidnapped, taken to the embassy and put in one of these rooms. Not a single Labour MP stood up when there was that question in Parliament to back these plans. Don't you think your own government should be thinking again?
Look, again, as I said, I'm going to be very boring. I can't comment on this because it is in front of planning.
You can. You're not involved in the decision.
The intelligence services are deeply concerned.
As someone who's actually asked questions about transnational repression in
David, you can comment on this. You're perfectly entitled to comment.
That's not true. No,
yes,
that's
you are. You're not the
true.
decision maker.
That's
the only
not
person
true.
who can't
That's
comment
not
is the
true.
decision maker,
No,
which
no,
is
no,
not
no.
you.
That's not right. It's in
Yes, it
front.
is.
It's in front of ministers under their quasi-judicial role. I'm not going to comment, but I've been very
You can
clear.
if you want to. You're choosing not to.
No. I've been very clear. We're going to stand up for the national interest, and we're going to protect security in a way that, frankly, your government fails.
You can't even bring yourself to express an
Can
opinion.
I ask you
That's
this then?
pathetic.
How tricky is this for the Prime Minister, this decision? Hearing what Chris and Munira have said and what the feelings are about national security, how difficult a choice is it for him?
Well, look, as I said, we're always going to stand up for the national interest, collaborating where it makes sense and challenging where it also makes sense and reflects our values. It's not an either or, but we're going to do the right thing to deliver for this country.
I'm afraid their behaviour suggests otherwise. They haven't even put China into the enhanced tier of furs. And you've got a Labour MP here not even expressing an opinion on the planning consent, which he is perfectly able to do. He's not the decision maker.
Was the Conservative government wrong to sell the site to China?
Well, look, selling a site is one thing. Giving planning permission is entirely a different one.
You encouraged them to set up an embassy there.
And
Sorry.
the simple fact is,
wrote a letter.
I didn't shop you. The simple fact is, the last Conservative government did not give planning permission for that site. And our position today is extremely clear. We absolutely oppose it. The Lib Dems clearly oppose it, and a lot of Labour backbench MPs, those with a backbone anyway, oppose it as well.
Munira, is China a hostile state?
Well, the fact that there is evidence of them conducting industrial-scale espionage on our institutions, including Parliament, suggests that they are. And I really implore David, yes, there are planning considerations, but if the security services say this is not safe, given the proximity and the scale of this embassy, Keir Starmer really needs to think again.
Well, all of these considerations are being taken into account as part of the planning process. But I will keep coming back to the security and the contrast between what we have done, whether it's investing in our defence, whether it's
you've come back to
investing in a China audit.
I'm afraid, David, we've
what
run
the
out of
last
time.
government
I'm
did
sorry, we've run
is
out
really
of time.
striking.
That's all we've got time for tonight. Thank you to my guests, David Pinto-Dushinsky, Chris Philp and Munira Wilson. We're back next month. Until then, goodbye and thank you for watching.